Prequel shows are really hard to get to work correctly. I get that you want to do them, you have a huge universe, and we don't know the early days of X story. Let's go into it, but it's a very restrictive box to be put in. There's places you can go, there's stories you can set up that pay off in later series, but you need to know the history a million times better so you don't contradict the smallest of things. To me, it's not worth it. There's so much you have to worry about, and Star Trek Enterprise was their first try, but it's more complicated than just the episodes are bad. It's a sandwich of issues that started even before the show was created. Star Trek is an old franchise. That also means its visual style. Star Trek was created in the 1960s. Technology, filming techniques, and its limitations created that iconic look. How do you make a prequel series that takes place within that point in time with it having a design progression, but you don't want your show to look cheap? That's a hard thing to pull off. It's funny today looking back at Enterprise when they struggled to balance the show's look, but things like the LCD screens are outdated now themselves. But for me, when I'm watching a show, doesn't matter if it's Star Trek or Knight Rider, that style is that universe. Like when we make period pieces, the Old West, for example, we don't stick in TV screens or computers. We'll make it historically accurate. With TOS, that's the history of Star Trek. You shouldn't screw around with it much. But I think overall they did a good job at respecting the original series while extrapolating progression from modern designs to TOS. They were a hell of a lot more successful than compared to the 2009 movie and later Kurtzman shows. But the issues pile up with Enterprise. Probably the biggest complaint that's not story related was the theme song. I don't have a problem with the song, either the original or remix. The thing is, this is Star Trek. It has a style. Every Star Trek has an original musical score. The theme song is out of place. You wouldn't put Brady Bunch music on a Hulk show. What's annoying is that Dennis McCarthy composed a full theme song for the series. It was included in the Enterprise pilot soundtrack under the name Archer's Theme. It's also used as the end credits and through the show. It was even used in one of the show's very early promos. That promo doesn't seem to exist anymore. It wasn't included in the bonus features of the DVD or Blu-rays. It was on StarTrek.com back in 2001. Basically, they had Scott Bakula say the whole Space, the Final Frontier lines, and they had the Archer's theme playing over that. So at some point, maybe as a temp demo, this was the early version of the theme, but they scrapped it, replacing it with what we got. When I saw that promo, I got out my CD to see if it was right, and the song worked. Everything lines up. The opening didn't get changed since the demo, just the music. So if you really wanted to, you can restore the original intended opening of the show with little work. Here's a small snippet of where the original music synchronizes with the visuals. What's worse, that after the show got retooled during season 3, they gave us that upbeat version, while that season was all about gritty action, terrorists, sphere builders, people dying all the time. That's possibly the worst point to do this change, and it didn't even matter. The problem was the song, not how it's arranged. There's still more to go. Next is the ship. The location the show takes place is extremely important. Up to this point, Star Trek came up with some great designs. I get it, there's been hundreds of ships and stations created, but the NX class was lazy. They took an existing design and flipped it upside down. Its basic shape was from a background ship in First Contact called the Akira class. Fans got annoyed at that. This haunted the show for the entire run. People called it the Akira Prize. The last early complaint was the show's name itself. I never understood this reason. You're a prequel series, so you dropped the Star Trek title? I remember them saying the name Enterprise is so iconic, people will know what it is. Yeah, but you can also think it's the Enterprise car company. This whole back and forth of the show's name was dumb. It should have been Star Trek Enterprise since day one. I didn't see Star Wars Episode 1 drop their title. It was pointless. The first airing of Season 3's pilot didn't even have the updated title. It had the new music, not the title. They even had Scott Bakula re-record the previously on segment line to include Star Trek, but he sounded bored doing it, and they never even used it after that point. They must have had loads of arguments behind the scenes. But let's get to what really matters. It's one thing to argue about the nacelles having the blue lights or not having the blue lights. What about the characters? What about the story? I'll start off with the crew. I think the casting and the characters are good. I know some people will disagree with Archer. He's a different captain compared to the past ones. His personality was all over the place. There are episodes where he got annoying. He's not my favorite. That still goes to Cisco. But I had no major problems with him. I think Bakula played him well. I had no complaints to the other mains. I thought each of them had interesting backgrounds. Hell, I wish characters like Shran would have become a main character on the show. But the series didn't use the characters equally. I get it. This is a prequel. You kind of want to go back to TOS style. We had Kirk, Spock, McCoy as the principal cast. So they did that again with Archer, Trip, and T'Pol. The other series did it too, just more subtle. But that doesn't mean you get to ignore Travis and Hoshi. I'm not singling out Enterprise. Voyager had the same problems with Kim and Chakotay. Troy did very little in TNG. TOS didn't give much to Sulu and Chekhov either. But Hoshi and Travis got shafted by a pole the size of Jupiter. At least Kim, in the future timeline, became captain. He got that bone. NX-01 is being decommissioned in the last episode. They served on the ship for 14 years, but Travis and Hoshi are still ensigns. How many times did these characters get overlooked? Hoshi, correct me if I'm wrong, she got the language episode, the transporter phased episode, and the creepy alien horror house one. That's a poor amount, but Travis has got to be the record. He only got 2 main episodes. The second one came right at the end of the series with that reporter woman. I was even thrown off guard with it. I was like, wait, Travis is a part of an episode? I know the writers thought his backstory was boring growing up in a hauling ship, but that doesn't mean you can't use the character at all. He could have gone off in a different direction. I thought that's what they were going to do when he did that speech to those aliens. No, he just sat at his helm and drove the ship. They didn't even think to bring him along when they did that Vulcan zombie episode. The guy who grew up on ships, the guy who dealt with small areas, the guy who dealt with pirates and other crazy crap. Now he's in the B story. How many freaking times did Kirk bring McCoy on missions he wasn't needed? Paris went on missions a lot. Paris even got his lieutenant rank twice in one series. Travis, all he got was that inverted gravity cupboard. Why the show slowly died? The stories. The largest issue is the recycling of plot lines, especially during season 1 and 2. Watch the bonus features on the Blu-ray. Braga is talking about them being burnt out. No, really? You launched a new Star Trek show right after Voyager, giving you no time to come up with fresh ideas. On top of the stupidest mandate, the company wanted time travel in the series. This temporal Cold War plotline was a goddamn waste of time. What was the point of this thing? So that we could get episodes showcasing different time periods? Or because you wanted to rip off Quantum Leap? The show wouldn't have had the budget to ever do that on a regular basis. They couldn't even afford to revamp the TNG movie sets back to their TNG appearances properly. So that main side story was this convoluted nonsense with the Daniels character that dies or doesn't die. I question why this went so far out of hand anyway. Why are we only seeing this now and never in any of the other series? So not only are they dealing with keeping Enterprise aligned with TOS, but you have this super massive time travel war that could be going on at any point in history, but never saw it in TOS, TAS, TNG, DS9, and Voyager.
We're done with you and your damn temporal Cold War.
This is why you don't willy-nilly throw around time travel. Star Trek just keeps doing this, like with the whole '09 timeline nonsense, which ended up being useless anyway. What's the point in making an alternate timeline to just retell the same stuff, except with Marvel what-if paint over it? Then you have Discovery's crap that I don't even want to get into. Stop using time travel. It makes everything worse. I will only give the Temporal Cold War 1 point when they finally ended it and actually used it. I still consider this the best flying Star Trek has ever done. The skill required for Travis to fly with only the RCS thrusters while using the ship's warp field to control its mass, with the ship being heavily damaged during the sphere fight, is a true test of his skill. What else was hated? The Vulcans were another issue with Enterprise. The idea the writers had was that while we are seeing Earth become what we know from the past series, how would the Vulcans be different in this century? Most fans didn't like how they portrayed the Vulcans because from the other shows, we had a set view of how they acted for decades. We know they could be dicks. Spock's father was something. But hiding technology, inhibiting humans, telling them what they could or couldn't do, which is why Archer hated them, especially with them interfering with his father's engine, people couldn't buy this. I didn't like it either because it felt arbitrary. There was that one episode where they were like, the Vulcans have a tractor beam. You guys built the transporter. This whole technology level doesn't make much sense here. It's the same problem that Metroid Other M ran into. No one could buy that Samus in that game would act like she did, so people rejected the game. I didn't have a problem with the Vulcans, mainly because they rectified the arc in Season 4, but if they failed to do this before the show got canned, I would have hated it like everyone else. I did like Saval. He's a dick, but at least he wasn't like all the other Vulcans. The Klingon stuff, again, they dealt with it in the last season, so the whole thing ended up being fine. What was unacceptable was them reusing stories from the other shows. They even admitted it in interviews. They were desperate to get scripts done, so we got that horrible Ferengi episode. And no, just because Archer scared one Ferengi ship doesn't mean every other Ferengi out there is going to be scared. You caused a continuity error by making the episode. Just like Discovery was like, oh, yeah, our ship is super advanced. We'll just order everyone to never speak of it again. I don't know which episode is more stupid. Ferengi never bumping into Earth ships for hundreds of years, Paris screwing Janeway as a lizard, or families, friends, and acquaintances never talking about several hundred people that went missing on a ship called Discovery. Prime examples of why doing prequels is not a good idea. Then you had loads of boring episodes. I was hoping for a Porthos episode, and I wish I didn't. They made that bad Night in Sickbay one. Of all the 4 seasons, Season 2 was the one I hated the most. Yeah, it had some gems. The episode that showed us how Trip and Archer met, the Andorian-Vulcan fight, that's where Saval finally showed he wasn't an asshole, and Susie Plaxton played that messed up Andorian woman that tried to screw everything up, but it was mostly filled with junk. That boring Klingon settlement episode, the Vulcans that landed on Earth in the 40s, they try to bring in stuff like Duras. How was that bad? It uses an established family featured in popular episodes of TNG, and we get to see how he was killed. But he is now a part of the Xindi arc, which was a planet-devastating event. This recontextualizes sins of the father and redemption. Why doesn't Picard know the Duras name? 200 years is not a long time, especially when the Xindi probe murdered 8 million people. But more importantly, why aren't humans blocked as arbitrary succession choices because of their potential bias towards the Duras family after Duras attempted to kill Archer and in the process doom Earth? That would be my main argument if I was Tyrell. This is minor compared to things like Dr. Phlox beating nanoprobes and regeneration, but it's still an issue. They also tried to do another time travel episode with that ship that ripped off a TARDIS. It was all over the place. That's what forced them to do the seasonal arc in Season 3. They knew they screwed up. Between the 2 seasons, the show lost around 8 million people. I don't really hate Season 3. I thought the Xindi were a cool idea, a race of multiple different species. The problem was they couldn't do episodes about all of them. 2 of them were CG characters, but it still stemmed from this temporal Cold War crap. We got that zombie Vulcan episode. We still ran into episodes that ripped off other shows. I really liked that Dr. Phlox one in that solo episode of his, but it was ripping off that Voyager episode called One. Ideas in Season 3 were cool. There's some things Archer had to do that were not good. It was something new to explore, but it didn't feel like Star Trek anymore. If you're going to tell the story of the past on how the Federation was created, it has to be about that. Not stupid time travel nonsense. Season 4 is what Season 1 should have been, and I don't mean the actual episodes. I mean the structure they did. After they concluded the Temporal Cold War story, the series did plot lines that were contained within 3 episode arcs, and they dealt with stuff they set up in Season 1. Why were the Vulcans acting the way they were acting? The Klingons and TOS having no ridges? They answered that. But thanks to Discovery, they go and make that a mess all over again. The whole point was to fix a continuity error. Discovery just goes and opens new ones. That's what they're great at. That's why more people are lenient on Enterprise nowadays. Back then, we thought what Enterprise screwed up on was the worst. Not when the 09 movies have transwarp beaming and tribbles that can bring you back to life. I won't gush over season 4. It had good episodes and a few that were weak, but nothing forgives that series finale. These Are the Voyages was completely unacceptable. I'll stick my feet into the shoes of Berman and Braga to try to explain why this happened. Enterprise got canceled where most of season 4 was completed. They didn't even have the courtesy to tell them at the beginning. At the end of the day, the guys who ran UPN didn't care about Star Trek anymore. Its viewership dropped to really low levels. It was doing better than, say, Stargate numbers, but it was on a network. It needed to have much more higher numbers. 18 continuous years of Star Trek dead. As a way to thank fans, or in B&B's words, a Valentine to the fans, the final episode jumped a decade into the future, as well as bringing back Commander Riker and Deanna Troi during TNG's episode called The Pegasus, with other references such as Reed saying all good things. From their perspective, they're honoring all of Star Trek in this one episode. From a fan's POV, you shafted the Enterprise cast. The first problem was that this was a single episode finale, which hasn't happened since TOS. With just this limitation alone should have scrapped this idea. You're trying to tell two stories at the same time, but this isn't why it's bad. The problem is twofold. This is the finale episode for the Enterprise cast. Why are you sharing it with the cast members from TNG? You didn't do that with TNG, DS9, and Voyager. Second, this wasn't even the real characters. To even get this to work, the Enterprise crew are holographic recordings being played back on the Enterprise D. All of them are created from log entries and personal logs that people left in archives. There is no way that the characters would be 100% accurate. Remember the Leah Brahm episodes? The computer couldn't even get her right, and her log entries were a few years old. Screw hundreds of years. Very little thought was put into this episode. That's why no one changed Hoshi and Travis's ranks on set. They were worrying about hundreds of other things instead of just telling us one final story with the Enterprise crew. They were more worried about checking boxes and not just leaving us with something enjoyable. They even forced an emotional reaction with the audience. Let's kill Trip. Yeah, in the most ridiculous and unbelievable way. Trip was literally character assassinated. No time to show a funeral, and no time to even show the goddamn Federation Charter. The whole point of the episode, hell, the whole point of the entire series, everything went bad. If maybe they didn't frame this in TNG, but had it just play out as a future episode, it might have worked a little better, but the other things would have been just as bad. The only positive that came out of the last episode is the last 40 seconds. Most people will consider Trip and T'Pol's loss of their baby as the final episode. They even screwed that up in the finale. So much bad came from that one episode. It undid all the good faith season 4 made up. That's why Berman and Braga got so much hate from fans between recycling ideas and writing that last episode. That's why Star Trek died for so long. How do you fix Enterprise? I could only think of little things here and there. One thing that I did find interesting, one of the early ideas they thought of was, well, have the show take place on Earth for 1 year while the ship was being built. I did agree that would have been too long, but the idea was still good. I would have done it where it was the first half of the pilot. It would feel different than past shows. I definitely would remove the temporal Cold War. It was useless, it was boring, and any chance they got to develop that story, they dropped it. Remember the woman who drugged Archer who was tied to Dean Stockwell's character? Rest in peace. That went nowhere. They already were ignoring it in the first season. The whole premise of the series was to tell us how the Federation formed. The early episodes, I will give them. They had to reintroduce the Andorians. We hadn't seen them since the quick glimpse with Data's daughter, and they revealed the Vulcans were lying about the outpost. Why didn't they keep that going? We kept getting random episodes that were bad in between. If you're going to do this Vulcan story, I would be going with it. This is where I would have had Archer go to Starfleet and be like, we can't trust the Vulcans. They don't even take this into consideration in the season 1 finale. They were screwed by some temporal Cold War people. The Vulcans shouldn't have been allowed to ever be a part of that decision after that secret base crap. The cooperation between Vulcan and Earth should have slowly fell apart, where we would have people like T'Pol, who would remain on Enterprise, and other Vulcans who would try to mend the fallout between the two planets, while they undercover the plot who set up Archer. It wouldn't be about some time war. It would be about people that didn't want the species around the galaxy to come together. And who could have that been? Maybe the guys called the Romulans? Set that up. The best thing would be merging the key episodes of season 1, 2, and 4 into one season. Like, season 1 would be the fallout between Vulcans and humans. Season 2 would be setting up the Romulans and the two opposing sides of Vulcans, meeting the other important races like the Tellarites. Set up everyone. Maybe the Romulans fell and get rid of Enterprise in the season 1 finale story, made them do something with the Klingons. Now we don't have the full help of the Vulcans. We have problems building up with the Klingons. Season 3 would be where Archer would deal with some tough things. I want to keep some things from season 3, working with T'Pol over the 2 years, seeing how she's trying to bring Vulcan and Earth together again. That's where Archer comes into play. Him saving Shran's ass, as well as helping out many other species over the seasons, where he starts the early coalition of planets. Then we could jump a few years ahead, where we get introduced to the NX-class ship upgrade and do the Romulan War for a couple of seasons, with the 4th season bringing everyone together, finally seeing the Federation Charter. It would be a powerful moment where, for most of the series, half of Vulcan was against Earth, but seeing Saval and T'Pau there signing it would be the last time we see those problems moving towards the future series. It sucks something like this didn't happen. Instead, we got temporal Cold Wars that went nowhere, ripped off stories from Voyager, TNG, characters that never get used, and really dumb ideas. Enterprise was not all bad, but half of it was. The one good thing I can say, it's not the worst show anymore. That goes to any of the current running series now.